Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2023 movie named Black Lotus. Keep alert, spoilers incoming. We open up in Hamburg, Germany at the German National Opera where an orchestra team is preparing for rehearsals though some armed gangsters are approaching towards them. They start to disperse as the team is not aware, and when their conductor arrives they begin the rehearsals, but shortly the gangsters arrive to shoot in the air. The rescue team led by John has arrived and he gives them the final instructions as the gangsters announce on a live stream that they have taken over and need a ransom of $300 million. John informs everyone to wait for his orders before shooting, but the leader of the gangsters pulls out one woman and shoot her dead, which prompts Mateo to defy John's orders and shoot at the gangsters. Without any other choice, John informs all the other tactical unit to open fire and eliminate the gangsters, which brings about a fight in which John's tactical unit show a lot of expertise and manage to wipe out most of the gangsters. After a short time of restless bullets, John comes to blame Mateo for defying his orders, but it seems he had been shot and not in a good condition. Suddenly one of the gangsters who had disguised as a hostage stands up and Mateo finishes him, but unluckily John gets shot dead. 5 years later in Romania, Mateo is a retired special force and working in a sawmill, though his life seems unpleasant after what happened to John, and when he gets a photo we flash back to the good times he had with John's family. On payday he announces his retirement, hence booking a ticket to Bucharest and sit in a van to leave, though on the other hand in Amsterdam the Interpol team led by Agent Shira have intercepted a drug shipment and have held mafias who come from different mafia groups. They hit one of them and take him away as one gangster reports to the mob boss named Shaban that Interpol has intercepted their shipment. It turns out that one of the captives is an undercover Interpol agent who helped in the interception of this drug shipment, and Shira informs him that he needs to press more because they need to arrest the mob bosses. Mateo has arrived in Amsterdam as we get introduced to Paul, a businessman who deals in cryptocurrencies, and over the phone he informs his client that everything is going well, but upon sitting on the computer to track his cryptographs it doesn't seem well. Mateo arrives at John's house where he finds his daughter named Angie, who he tells to call her mum named Helen, who gets amazed upon seeing him and invite him inside for coffee. While inside, Mateo learns that Helen is now married to Paul and Helen blames him for not attending John's burial, yet he was like a brother to him. Mateo apologizes that it was his fault John died, which Helen doesn't welcome because she had moved on and didn't want to get reminded about it again. Mateo moves out to leave, but Helen calls him back to stay for a while as Shaban gets misunderstandings with his chef over the dish he prepares, which doesn't attract clients in his restaurant. Helen informs Mateo that he can use some of John's remained items if he wishes and that it is good to see him again after a long time, though Shaban and his men have realized that there's a mole within them. Paul finds Mateo home with Angie and Helen informs him that he was John's friend and would be staying for a while, and after dinner Mateo sits outside and gets memories while with John in Afghanistan when they were on a mission talking about their families, and John informed him that Helen was pregnant. Angie informs her mum that she liked Mateo before sleeping as Paul moves to have a little chat with Mateo, who informs him that there's always something to fight for. Helen informs Paul that he has nothing to worry about Mateo since they had gone through a lot together with John, as Mateo finds a note from Angie asking him not to leave without goodbye. In the morning he moves out for jogging and on his way back he finds Helen and Angie leaving for school and she requests him to stay with her dog. At work Paul gets visited by Shaban, who has come to inquire about his €15 million missing on the account, and Paul tries to explain to him that there's a little complication on the crypto market, but it's gonna be solved soon. He requests for 1 day as Shaban looks at a photo of his family and remind him that he has 1 day, but on moving outside the Interpol undercover agent is tracking them, but when he moves inside it's learnt that they are tracking him as well. Bored with his life, Mateo tries to do some carpentry work before Helen comes to invite him for an outing where he gets a good time with them, mostly with Angie. Worried, Paul returns home broken, and when Helen asks him the matter he only informs her that he has some account calculations to work out but doesn't tell her the truth about Shaban. Mateo continues with his exercises, and while some tourists are on their adventure get shocked by a dead body hanging on a bridge, and it is learned that he was murdered by Shaban's men after realizing he was the mole working with Interpol. Shira and her partner arrive at the scene as Mateo stays home to continue with his carpentry work. Over the news they announce a decline in cryptocurrency as Paul receives a call from Shaban demanding his money as he was granted only 1 day, but Paul informs him that he will fix it though Shaban sends his men to work out the issue. Shira and her partner realize that the gangsters were sending them a message as Angie moves to tease Mateo about his scars before hugging him tightly, which Helen notices. Paul calls Helen that he wouldn't be able to come over as he has some business to handle, and while out for pizza Angie presents a drawing to Mateo as Helen asks him stay a little longer for Angie's sake. Suddenly some gangsters arrive and hit Mateo with a butt, and when Angie notices it she runs back to stop them. Mateo saves her from a hit but she gets kidnapped while Mateo gets hit down, but he gets a bicycle to chase the car as Helen informs Paul about the kidnap and he calls Shaban to plead but he only hangs up. Mateo keeps the chase on and shortly he jumps on top of one of the cars and starts to fight them, which later brings about a collision with another car, hence Mateo falling on the other, and get memories while still with John telling him how they are a family. Mateo wakes up in a hospital, though handcuffed, as Shira introduces herself to Helen and Paul, but shortly Mateo moves out. They release him and Shira asks him about his next move and he informs her that he is going to rescue Angie, and she informs him about Shaban and the other gangs related, and according to their research Angie's kidnap is personal, but when they ask Helen and Paul if they know anything about it Paul stays silent. Shira gives Mateo her business card and when the others leave Shira and her partner try to figure out the connection between Shaban and the kidnap, though one of Shaban's men notices all this going on. Angie is now in captive at Shaban's club where he gets informed that Mateo left the hospital, though Mateo, while holding a drawing Angie gave him, he recalls when John asked him to be Angie's godfather. He gets out some items to go for a rescue and when Paul comes to warn him he accidentally slips about Shaban's connection with the Thais, hence Mateo realizing that Paul knows something and on confronting him he reveals the truth that he owes Shaban 15 million euros. Mateo gets John's guns and order Paul to call Shaban and make him believe that he has the money, which he does, and they agree on a trade for Angie. Shaban agrees to the deal and order him to deliver the money at a construction site as Mateo promises Helen that he will bring Angie back. Interpol has learned that Paul knows something, but shortly Mateo ambushes Shira's partner and leave with his car, but Helen invites him inside for coffee where he calls Paul for a talk, but Paul gets afraid knowing he is from Interpol. Mateo has arrived at the construction site for the exchange where he meets some of the gangsters who he asks for Angie, but they shockingly tell him that they don't have her as the deal was only to bring the money so Angie could be spared. They take his bag forcefully, but when the team leader goes to check it turns out it's a bomb which explodes to hit some gangsters and Mateo hits the rest and after drag the survived leader for interrogations. At home Helen gets captured by one of Shaban's men who gets into a fight with the Interpol agent, and after a short scuffle the gangster cuts him multiple times with a blade, and it's only Helen who shoots to scare him away. Paul packs to leave as Mateo ties up the gangster he captured and torture him for Angie's whereabouts, but he insists first before finally breaking down to reveal the location. Helen attends to the wounded Interpol agent, but when he asks Paul for assistance he reluctantly ignores them to move out to head for his car, though one of Shaban's men had been waiting and finishes him off. Shira has arrived as the gangster leaves, and while inside Shira comforts his partner that he would receive a medallion on his heroism. Mateo informs Shira to bring backup as he heads for the rescue, though Shaban seems worried after not hearing from his men, hence sitting down with Angie to ask her about Mateo if he will come for her rescue, and she replies that he would come. Mateo has arrived at the club, and when the bodyguards try to stop him from moving up he engages them as Shira arrives as well and start to shoot out some gangsters, and the fight gets tense inside when Shira and Mateo team up to clean the place. Shaban decides to run as Shira and Mateo finish the men inside, though Shaban tells his men to stay behind, and when Mateo with Shira come across them a 2 versus 2 fight breaks up as Shaban keeps running with Angie. The fight continues. Mateo decides to go alone for Shaban, and when he meets him with Angie, Shaban warns him not to come closer or else he would shoot Angie dead. Suddenly Mateo throws a blade into Shaban's heart, though he shoots him as well, but luckily Mateo survives and Angie moves to check on him. 6 months later, Angie is with Helen, wondering if Mateo will ever be back, as Mateo is again alone on a boat sailing on the waters. In the hospital, Shura's partner receives his Medal of Honor as Shura arrives to tell him that they have more work to do, bringing the movie to the end. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Thanks for watching. Until next time, have a nice day.